Good evening, guys. All right, today we're going to get stuck into some simple interest. We're going to be applying the simple interest formula to a variety of different situations. And we're going to learn how to actually identify the variables within different examples. Okay, so let's get stuck straight into it. First of all, we need to identify the simple interest formula. Now, the simple interest formula can be described as I, which is interest amount, equals P, which is the principal, multiplied by R, which is the interest rate, multiplied by T, which is the number of time periods, divided by 100. Now, once we've identified this formula, it's now even more important to describe each variable within the formula. Because once we have a greater understanding of each variable within the formula, we can identify those variables when we're given a worded question. So we can identify I as the interest amount, And we most commonly find I described in terms of dollars. P, or the principal, can be described as the original amount, and that original amount is either borrowed or usually invested, and that can also be described in terms of dollars. We have R, and R can be described as the interest rate. That interest rate is described as a percentage, and usually we find the interest rate as per annum, which means calculated yearly, but we can sometimes come across the interest rate as per month or even per day. And it's important to mention that before we mention the variable T, which can be described as the number of time periods. The biggest mistake with this formula is that people think of T simply as time. But we need to put time into context. And the context that we need to relate time to is the interest rate. So if we came across a question that dealt with an interest rate per annum, then one time period would be 1 year. Two time periods would be 2 years. If we were dealing with an interest rate that was calculated per month, then one time period would be 1 month. Two time periods would be 2 months. 12 time periods would be 12 months. If we were dealing with an interest rate that was calculated per day, then 3 time periods would be classified as 3 days. And we're going to describe that further when we actually get into an example. So, looking at example 1, if Gary invests $2,450 at a simple interest rate of 4.8% per annum, what will be the interest paid over 2 years? Well, first of all, let's write down our formula. Interest amount equals principal multiplied by interest rate multiplied by number of time periods divided by 100. Now let's actually identify each of those variables within the formula that relates to the question we're dealing with. So I, which is interest amount, are we given that in the question? No, we're not. We're actually asked what will be the interest paid, over 2 years. So I is our unknown, okay? The interest amount is what we're going to try and find. P, let's identify P. Well, P is our original amount invested or borrowed. P is our principal, which in this case is $2,450. So we're going to put that into our P, $2,450. Now we need to identify our R, our interest rate. Our interest rate here is 4.8% per annum. Very important to recognize that it's 4.8% per annum, which means that percentage is calculated at the end of every year. So now when we're dealing with time, T, we can say, well, how many time periods are we dealing with? we're dealing with 2 years. Because our 2 years relates to per annum, we can say that one time period is 1 year. Therefore, over 2 years, we're dealing with 2 time periods. So we can simply put 2 into our value of t. Our next step is to take our identified variables and input it into the formula. So let's rewrite that formula out. I equals PRT over 100. Let's input that in. So we're going to say I equals 2,450 multiplied by 4.8 multiplied by 2 divided by 100, worst fraction line ever, equals $235.20. $235.20. So what we can say there is if $2,450 is invested at 4.8% per annum over a 2-year period, so that was a simple interest rate of 4.8% over a 2-year period, you would earn $235.20. Okay guys, let's move on to another example. We have example 2 of what simple interest rate is $16,800 borrowed if $3,218 in interest is paid over a 4-year period. So to start with, let's write out our formula. Interest amount equals principal times interest rate multiplied by number of time periods divided by 100. Let's identify our variables. Let's say we have I, which is our interest amount. Are we given that in our question? So at what simple interest rate is $16,800 borrowed if $3,218 in interest? So we've got $3,218 in interest. So let's write that down. $3,218 in interest is paid over 4 years. Now we're going to try and find our principal in our question. Well, our principal is easy to find. That's the original amount borrowed, which is $16,800. Can we find our interest rate? Our interest rate at what simple interest rate? Okay, so it's actually asking us to find the simple interest rate. So we're going to say R equals unknown. That's what we're going to find in this question. And T, a number of time periods. Well, here we're dealing with 4 years. Because the question doesn't actually ask whether or not it wants us to figure out the simple interest rate per annum, per month, or per day, we're going to assume that it's asking us to find per annum. So we're going to say the number of time periods is 4. Our next step here is to input what we know into the formula. I equals principal multiplied by interest rate multiplied by time periods over 100. Therefore, 3,218 equals our principal, which was 16,800, multiplied by R multiplied by 4 divided by 100. Now at this point we need to use our understanding of algebra in order to find our unknown variable, which in this case is R. So what we need to do is multiply the right hand side by 100, and by doing so we cancel out our denominator of 100. But whatever we do to the right hand side of the equal sign, we also must do to the left hand side. So we're going to end up with 321,800 equals 16,800 multiplied by R multiplied by 4. Now we simply need to divide 16,800 times R times 4 by 16,800 times 4. That will cancel off our 16,800. That will also cancel off our 4. Whatever we do to the right, we must also do to the left. So it's 16,800 multiplied by 4. We're going to end up with R equals, our interest rate equals 321,800 divided by 67,200. Therefore, we can say that our interest rate equals 4.79% per annum. Now, guys, in this example, just to recap what we have done to find the interest rate is we have used our interest amount of $3,218. We've used our principal of $16,800, and we've used 4 years as 4 time periods. It's important to recognize in this example that you do need an understanding of algebra in order to find the unknown variables of R, interest rate in this case. But if you're facing a similar question where you may have to find the principal, or you may have to find the length of time at which the amount of interest is calculated over, a similar example will apply. If you have any questions, guys, please don't hesitate to ask in class. Looking forward to seeing you then.